guys, today I am going to be talking to you a bit about photosynthesis, and tomorrow we're going to talk a bit about cellular respiration. So for today, you're going to need your journal, so you can go ahead and grab that if you don't already have it with you, and we're going to get started. In my classroom and online, when I give notes to you guys, I underline certain things that I want you to make sure that you write in your journal. So you can write everything, but you only have to write the stuff that's underlined. Okay, so we're going to get started. So photosynthesis and respiration is kind of going to be the title on your page. So when we talk about photosynthesis and respiration, photosynthesis is the process where plants take energy from the sun and it gets transformed in the process of photosynthesis to glucose, which is a sugar, right? And then cellular respiration uses that glucose and the oxygen that's produced to turn it into ATP, which is the type of energy that cells can use. Cells can't use glucose, they have to convert it into ATP. Cell activities can be done and completed because of that ATP production, right? They can't use glucose. They have to change that glucose that we eat, right? Plants can't eat, so they have to make their own. So sun is where they get the energy from. It's transformed through the process of photosynthesis, used in cellular respiration, and then the cell can complete the activities and processes that they need to do. Remember, cells' main jobs, protein makers, and so they've got to have that ATP energy to be able to make those proteins. Okay. Autotrophs. That's a fancy science word, right? Autotrophs are organisms that use light energy from the sun to produce food. Auto is a word part that means self. So self-producing. What are some things that self-produce? Things like plants, right? Plants and microorganisms are usually the organisms that we see use light energy to produce their own food. Okay, so when we look at organisms like sunflowers and trees, they don't get up and go get their food like we do. They absorb energy from the sun and transform it through this process of photosynthesis, which we're going to talk more about today. This is underlined, so please write this in your notes. Autotrophs are organisms that use light energy from the sun. And give yourself a couple of examples, right? A sunflower, a rose, a tree, right? All of those are autotrophs, which go through the process of photosynthesis. Heterotrophs are the opposite of autotrophs. Heterotrophs cannot use energy from the sun to make their own food, so we have to consume autotrophs, right? We and lots of other animals on the planet take energy from plants and other organisms in order for us to be able to survive. And so things like chickens, cats, donkeys, different types of bacteria and fungi, they all break down other organisms to take the glucose that they made from that process of photosynthesis, and then our body cells can turn that glucose into ATP energy, right? So we're all relying on that energy that gets captured by those autotrophs. And so it's really important that those autotrophs are healthy and taken care of, because not only is it important for those autotrophs, but it's important for us. Okay, photosynthesis is the process we're going to be talking about today. And photosynthesis is the process that converts light energy from the sun into chemical energy of glucose. Glucose is a chemical, right, with a chemical formula, and we're going to look at that in a minute. But sunlight is what is required to make it, and photosynthesis is the process that does it. It is vitally important, not just for us, but for all organisms on Earth, because they produce glucose for us to eat. They produce oxygen, which we need to breathe. And so both of those things are really important. They take in sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water, and they put off oxygen and glucose. Remember, anything that's underlined in the PowerPoint, I do expect you to write in your journals, okay? Photosynthesis is a chemical reaction, right? It is the most important chemical reaction on our planet because of what we just said, right? It is vitally important for us to have organisms that go through photosynthesis because we can't, right? We can't stand out in the sun and feel full. And so we have to have other organisms do that so that we can consume them. And so this is a very important chemical reaction. All life on planet Earth depends on photosynthesis happening. If photosynthesis was to somehow stop, life would not be able to carry on. So it is very important for photosynthesis to happen. So now we're going to talk about the equation, and this equation is not underlined, but I do expect you to write this in your journal. Basically what happens is a plant takes in water from their roots, they take in carbon dioxide through their leaves, and they produce oxygen, right? They produce oxygen, they produce glucose, right? We know that plants give off oxygen, but how does that work? So we've got this whole equation that works together. So let's look at the parts that go into it. So we're going to start out with carbon dioxide. How does a plant take in carbon dioxide? It takes it in through its leaves. We're going to add in some water, right? Some water from the roots. Remember, you're writing this equation down, and I would definitely put those labels with it because sometimes we forget what those letters mean, okay? So we're going to take 6 carbon dioxide molecules. We're going to take 6 water molecules, and we're going to add in that energy. Where's that energy going to come from? That energy is going to come from the sun, okay? Now, these are what we call our reactants. They're the things that work together to create the products. And so our products, what's produced in the process of photosynthesis is this. What is that? C6H12O6. What does that mean? That is a glucose molecule, right? And glucose is the type of energy that cells can convert into ATP. So glucose is very important. Also produced as a byproduct is oxygen. And some of that oxygen is put off by the plant, and some of that oxygen is used through the process of cellular respiration. So make sure you've got this equation written down in your journals, right? 6 carbon dioxide molecules, 6 CO2 plus 6 H2O. Water we know is H2O. We're going to put in some energy from the sun, and that's going to transform through a chemical reaction. Remember, we're changing things, chemical structure, so we're making something new, into glucose, C6H12O6, and oxygen, right? And some of that oxygen is put off by the plant, which is great for us because we like to breathe that. And some of that oxygen is used in the process of cellular respiration. Now, inside each of the plants, there are some things that make this process possible, some things they have that we don't have, right? One of those things is chlorophyll. Chlorophyll is contained inside chloroplast. Remember, chloroplasts are what we looked at in the Elodia lab inside those plant cells, right? Those things that were moving around. So in those chloroplasts are chlorophyll, the things that make it green. And these help the plant absorb light, right? They help the plant capture light. It's actually called a photon, right? Remember, photo means sun or light. And so when chlorophyll captures that sunlight, it enables the plant to go through this process of photosynthesis. Some of you guys may have noticed that in the fall, some types of trees lose their leaves, and those leaves change colors. This happens because that green chlorophyll fades, and it's only left the other tissues that are in those leaves. The same thing happens with bananas, right? If you've bought bananas at the store, sometimes they're a little green, and that's because they have chlorophyll in them too. And as they ripen, that chlorophyll goes away. It fades, right? And it gets replaced by the yellow that's left, that is the banana tissue. So all of those processes, very important. So what happens during photosynthesis? Okay, you talked about the parts, Miss Young. What exactly happens? Okay, well, plants, number one, they capture light energy, radiant energy from the sun, and they transform that into glucose, which is a chemical, right? So we're doing an energy transformation. We've got plants, they capture that light energy, that radiant energy, and they're going to change it through that chemical reaction into glucose, right? The only time we can have that change in this type is if we have a chemical reaction, right? We're going to transform it. Just like if we were to burn a candle, right? We're transforming stored energy, right? That's in the wick of that candle into heat and light energy, right? So a chemical reaction takes place, the burning of the wick. So same thing's happening here, right? We're taking radiant energy, light energy, and we're transforming it into a chemical energy. Remember, we're transforming it through this chemical reaction, right? This chemical reaction is what enables that process to happen, okay? Oxygen gets released in this process, and oxygen is good for us. and it's also needed by the plant. So the plant is actually producing all the things it needs to go through cellular respiration as well. And we're going to talk more about cellular respiration tomorrow. Carbon dioxide comes in the plant through these small holes in the leaves called stomata. And those stomata actually open and close to protect the plant from losing too much water, because water can actually get pulled out of the plant through the stomata. And so they have little guard cells that are kind of closed like little mouths or little lips to keep water vapor from leaving the plant so that it doesn't lose too much water. Carbon dioxide comes in through these stomata, and oxygen, right, remember, is a waste product from the plants. It is expelled through these same openings. So stomata are very important. They're how the plant breathes, right? They're how the plant exchanges their gases, okay? Now remember, we're going to combine that carbon dioxide that's coming in through those stomata in the chloroplast in that chemical reaction, this photosynthesis reaction. Photosynthesis happens in the chloroplast of plants. And so remember, we looked at these under the microscope last week when we were doing our Alodia plant lab. You can see those chloroplasts moving around in the cell. And those chloroplasts are vitally important because that's where photosynthesis happens, right? This is what plants have that people and other heterotrophic organisms do not have. We can't produce our own food because we don't have chloroplasts. Sugar gets moved through tubes and the leaves and the stems to other parts of the plant. And this sugar, that's where we get tree rings, right? There's different colored rings because there's different types of tissues. Some tissues in trees and other plants transfers sugar, glucose, and some transfers water from the roots to the other parts of the plant. So the glucose that's produced, though, has kind of three different things that it can do, three different places it can go. Some of it is used right away for the plant for energy, right? Just like when we eat because we need energy, right? You might eat before you work out or when your stomach growls, right? Sugar is needed for plants and animals to go through cellular respiration. And so some of it's used right away for energy for the plant. Some of it gets stored as a starch in the plant. And we see this in stems and leaves, helps the plant grow, right? And some of it gets built into other plant tissues. Think about some of it gets put in the roots, right? Think about how big a potato is, right? That is a part of the plant, right? That's stored as starch. Think about the stem of a celery stalk. That is plant tissue. So in different areas, it's produced and stored in different ways, okay? Important part is it's either used right away for energy, stored as starch like a root, like an onion or a potato, or built into the plant tissue like the stalk or the leaves of the plant. Why do we care? Why is this important? Why does Miss Young have to teach us about photosynthesis? We can't make our own food, right? So we must get our food from other plants. Plants are always the first step in the food chain. They're our producers. They produce energy that everything else depends on. So this is a very important part of the operations of our whole planet, right? Of our whole ecosystem. Because without plants, we wouldn't be able to survive. The things that we eat wouldn't be able to survive. If you're thinking in your head, well, Miss Young, I could just eat steak all day. I don't have to have vegetables. Well, that's fine. But what does the cow eat? Cow eats grass. Grass is a plant. So we have to have plants to be able to go through all of the processes that we need to go through. And so plants are vitally important to life on our planet. Oxygen released during photosynthesis is also necessary for us, right? We breathe in the oxygen that's produced by all plants during photosynthesis. This should be underlined, but that's okay. You guys write this in your journals, even though it's not underlined. The oxygen is necessary for us, right? We need the oxygen that is produced by plants and other microscopic organisms. In fact, most of the oxygen that we breathe in is produced by ocean organisms that go through photosynthesis. And so we need those oceanic organisms to be taken care of. And that's why it's very important that we take care of our oceans, right? They have a very narrow window of temperature. So that's why issues like global warming are so important, because we need what's produced by those organisms. So it might seem really easy to kind of put out of your mind. But we rely on those organisms, not just for our food, but for the air we breathe as well. Okay. We're going to stop here and pick back up tomorrow so that you guys can learn a little bit more about cellular respiration. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you. Gotta find my pauser. There we go. I hope you guys have a fantastic day, and I will see you soon.